Influencing popular culture, politics, and everything in between. The local station takes you ringside as we discuss the crazy world that is professional wrestling. This is Going Ringside with the local station.
Hello there, and welcome to Going Ringside. I'm your host, Scott Johnson. So glad you could be with us. Another packed show, once again on America's fastest growing wrestling talk show, soon to be the biggest in the country is our goal here going into 2025. But we got a show for you today. I want to talk to you about our big lineup today. We are starting with the man, the son of the legend, a legend in his own right. We're talking about Joe Hennig. You may have remembered him as Curtis Axel, Mr. Perfect's real-life son. I caught up with Joe Hennig over the summer. We were so excited to talk with him about his fascinating career that has spanned a few decades, growing up in the the shadow of his father and really eclipsing that and becoming his own star. And we are going to be talking to him. And then a little later on in the show, McKenzie Mitchell will be here. You want to join her later on the show, hear about what she's doing. She's one of those people, when you talk to her, you're like, wait a minute. I've done TV for a long time. I could tell she has done TV for a long time, too. Just one of the broadcasters with NXT, with TNA for a while. You can zoom it in here to me as we talk, though, about our first guest on the show today. That would be Curtis Axel, Joe Hennig, that man right there. So I remember growing up on his dad, Curt Hennig, Mr. Perfect, and his grandfather, Larry the Axe Hennig. It was a little before my time. But when he came in many, many years ago now, he was brought in as Curtis Axel. We always kind of knew where his lineage lay. It came from his dad, Curt Hennig, one of the greatest in-ring performers, maybe the greatest in the history of this industry. And he took up his dad's mantle, bringing on that Hennig name. So we caught up with Joe Hennig over the summer at a wrestling convention and chatted with him about what is life like right now, what was life like for you, starting in the industry that your grandfather built, that your dad built, and then he helped continue to build. Here's Joe Hennig, or you maybe remember him as Curtis Axel. Well, we're here with Joe Hennig. You may have known as Curtis Axel over the years. Joe, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. This is great here in Jacksonville. There's tons of people around here, tons of wrestlers. I get to see old friends I haven't seen in a few years, but the atmosphere is incredible around here right now.
So what's going on in your world right now?
Well, I've spent the last few years being a dad and then just spending time with my 3 boys at home and my wife, which I haven't been able to do being on the road so much as I was with WWE at the time.
Sure.
So I've been enjoying that, but I started doing these things and getting the itch again, and I've actually been training in the ring, taking a few bumps, so I'm slowly inching my way closer to make a return.
Have you been away from ring work for a while now?
Yep.
How did you get in? I know obviously you grew up with Dad, but was it natural progression for you, or was it what you wanted to do originally?
So when I was younger, my father said, yeah, I don't want you to, I don't want you to do this, you can find something else. But as I got older, like high school age, he started working with Randy Orton and stuff like that. And he's like, hey, are you still interested? And I said, yes. And that's when I was really starting to get into it.
Okay.
He said, okay.
This would have been in the 90s? Or early 2000s?
This was, it was actually 96-ish. So.
Okay.
And then
everything's taking off at this point in wrestling.
Yes, I'm getting bigger. I was always kind of smaller in school, but then I started getting bigger and all that stuff. And then Brad Rangens in Minnesota had
now,
a
is
camp.
that the guy I've heard of? I've heard of your dad and Rick Rude, and people would always talk about Brad Rangens.
Brock Lesnar. Yes, that's a big prestigious school up there, and I was waiting for that school to happen. Unfortunately, my dad passed away, and that didn't happen at the time. But eventually, Brad contacted me. I went there. Eventually, went to Harley Race's school in Missouri, and then got signed with WWE eventually. So.
How did Curtis Axel become your name? I think I know the backstory, but how did that process work?
Well, first of all, I would do anything it took to get rid of Michael McGillicuddy.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But it was something that me and Paul
actually, let me back up. How did Michael McGillicuddy happen?
I have no idea. I still don't know. I know people were on a plane making a joke, and I don't know, it just stuck for a while, but I took 2 years to get rid of it, and I don't want to think about it right now, but it was something, Curtis Axel was something that me and Paul Heyman kind of played with. I was going to be, we wanted to be called Curtis Mayhem, not Curtis Axel. Vince went with Curtis Axel instead.
Was Axel based on your grandfather?
Yes.
Okay.
Kurt as my dad, Larry the Axe my grandfather.
Yeah.
So,
Was it... different for you to grow up in it? A lot of guys don't. Some guys do. You grew up in it, you know, multiple generations. What was that like?
I mean, it's just a part of your family. Like, you know, my brothers and sisters, people always ask me, like, you know, how was it being your dad as a professional wrestler? I never thought of it anything more than just that's my dad's job.
Yeah.
So it was nothing crazy to me. I could see for an outsider looking in, it's kind of a different thing, but it was just my dad's work, you know what I'm saying?
So kind of, you come in, I think it was Nexus was one of your early things.
Yep.
What was that run like?
It was cool. I was just talking to JoJo over here, and me and Wyndham actually broke into Nexus together, but that was cool, man. Like, we got called on the road one day. We didn't know what we were doing. Next thing we get to the show, they said, hey, you guys are going to be 2 new members of the Nexus. And I go, okay, let's go.
You did a lot. Eventually, you wanted to go backstage at WWE, do producing backstage, is that right?
I was doing that for a little bit.
Why did you decide to do that? I mean, was it just the ring work was hard, or?
They actually
I think fans
me.
don't understand producing.
It's a different outlook on how it works, like what goes on backstage, for sure. Mm-hmm. They actually approached me with an offer, and I said, okay, I'll check it out. That's something that's still on the table. I think I could go back there and do that and help out. And I really like coaching the next up-and-comers. And so, like, it's very rewarding to give my insight to them and have these different ideas that, you know, we can collaborate and make the match even better. So I really enjoyed that part, and being a part of the creative side, it was pretty cool.
So how many kids do you have?
3 boys.
So I'm assuming it's good to be around them more than on the road. I mean, that dynamic's hard, isn't it?
Yeah, man, it's been awesome. Like, my oldest boy's 16 now, and he was born the year I started. Yeah. So, like, I was gone pretty much, you know, his whole life. But, like, now it's cool because I get to become a coach with wrestling, and I coach football, and it's very rewarding for me to, you know, spend time on a boat fishing, doing all that stuff. You know?
Sure. How's the body doing? You say you're getting in ring shape. I mean, do you have bumps and bruises, or are you kind of healed to being away from it?
I feel fantastic. I feel
That's
fantastic.
Great. Yeah.
You know, I'm 44 years old, but I don't, you know, knock on wood, I've never had a crazy serious injury. So.
Any guys you keep in touch with close still in the industry?
Heath Slater.
Oh yeah.
Johnny Curtis, Fandango, and just randomly I'll text, you know, the Good Brothers, and just, you know, and being here and all that kind of stuff, but it's just random, basically texting.
And what are your thoughts on where the industry's at right now? 10 years ago, we had one company. Now that company's merged with the UFC. We've got other competing companies with a lot of money. What do you think about the industry right now?
I think it's good for fans and wrestlers. Like, there's more options to go work and make money, you know, and it's crazy seeing how many more wrestlers are wanting to get involved and trying to build and go to schools. But I think right now, in this era we're living in, is a very exciting era for not only up-and-coming wrestlers, but wrestling fans.
Sure. Well, Joe Hennig, formerly Curtis Axel, back in the day, thanks for joining us on the show today.
Appreciate it, man.
Thanks. So I appreciate Joe taking the time to talk with us about his career, and we've got another guest with us today, and that would be McKenzie Mitchell, right there, who is one of those announcers who just... everyone kind of remembered her as soon as she showed up on camera in TNA years ago, and then WWE brought her in to the NXT brand. We caught up with her over the summer. She's been doing a lot. If you check her out on social media, what is going on in her life is a lot. She is a very busy woman, very high-profile woman that a lot of people are continue to talk about from her wrestling background and now beyond into the future. So let's get to it. Here is our interview with McKenzie Mitchell. Well, we're joined now by McKenzie Mitchell. McKenzie, thank you for joining us on the show today.
Thanks for having me. I'm really glad to be here.
So, before we get to the wrestling background, what's going on in your world right now?
So, I'm really focusing on my YouTube channel called Threads with McKenzie Mitchell, where we talk about iconic looks from iconic moments in the past. A lot of the times in the interviews, you hear talking about the biggest moments, winning a title, matches, moves. But for me, it's really talking about the style and the fashion side of things.
So, how do people find it?
So, it's on YouTube, Threads with McKenzie Mitchell. We also just started streaming on audio as well, so you can find it wherever you get your podcasts. YouTube, social media, it's all on my Instagram, McKenzie Mitchell, and that's where you're able to find everything.
I've worked in news for so long, I can tell you kind of have a news broadcasting
I know, right?
On.
Well, I have a bit of experience.
That start? Yeah.
So I was a broadcast journalism major at the University of Mississippi, where I worked with their sports. I went to Ole Miss, and so I worked with their sports department.
Okay, gotcha.
Football, baseball, basketball. I was their MC for 4 years, and so I was the girl in the middle of the court at the arena, and having that experience there really got me my footing for a later career in professional broadcasting. And
so how does it go from doing sports broadcasting in Mississippi to pro wrestling? How does that transition happen?
I really got lucky because I know, and I'm sure you understand, it's kind of hard to get a job outside of college and going right into professional broadcasting and finding a career that you love. And for me, I knew I wanted to work in sports, entertainment, or music. I wanted to live in Nashville. I made that transition really easily from Mississippi to Nashville. And I got lucky with some really great connections that connected me and put me in good hands with TNA Wrestling is where I started.
So you get to TNA, what was that experience like?
Oh my gosh, crazy. I had never really watched professional wrestling before, so I was learning everything from scratch.
Okay, I got to back up.
No. I've been in the industry for 10 years. I know, but I got to back up. It fascinates
me, a person who's never watched wrestling, to be in it.
Of course.
Was that just a culture shock for you?
Absolutely. And I really attest to just putting your head down and like learning the industry and whatever it is that you're trying to get into. Yeah. And that's what I did, is I just really learned, and I watched the product, and I memorized as much as I could, and I would just Google and in my own way visually write down the things that made sense to me about professional wrestling. And actually, my first interview that I did was live was with Jeff Hardy, who's behind us here today.
Oh my God, really? Okay. Small world.
Small world, and here we are now, nearly 10 years later, where I'm on a completely different timeline, different experiences that I've had.
Backstage interviewers, what's that like for wrestling? Because we know the show in the ring.
Yeah.
We know the backstage segments, but from the interviewer perspective, what is that like?
There's never a dull moment, I can tell you that.
Yeah.
Because with wrestling, there is, we do have an idea of where we're going with the conversation, right? Like when we start the interview, we have an idea of what we want to accomplish. But let's say that someone wants to take it in a different direction. It's all about listening to what the talent, the superstar,
Did you have to
the
do a
wrestler.
lot of ad-lib with that?
Sometimes, yeah. And I think that's a really important part about being a broadcaster, is just understanding and listening to what your guest or your interviewer, or your interviewee, I should say, is talking about. Because if you miss that point and you're thinking about the next thing that you're supposed to ask, sometimes you really miss those story points. So for me, it was just listening to what the wrestlers had to say, and sometimes having fun with it and bouncing off of each other and going like, what are you even talking about? That doesn't make sense.
There's a phrase in wrestling called smarten up. Did you ever have to get smartened up in the process?
There's a lot of those types of things being smartened up in the wrestling industry, of the rules and regulations of the old timers, if you will. But I was lucky enough to never have to get smartened up, if you will. But it's just about experience and getting reps, and really the reputation that you stand in the wrestling industry. It speaks for everything.
So you go from TNA to WWE.
That's right.
What's that transition like to the global juggernaut?
Oh my gosh. Well, I was really lucky that I got my experience with TNA, the groundwork that I laid in TNA to then transition that to WWE. I was so lucky, because you look at the likes of WWE, they're a huge corporation seen by billions across the world on a weekly basis. And so I'm really glad that I got to learn and get all the kinks out in the beginning with TNA, and then transition to WWE to have a great time and a really good experience.
Any favorite memories from TNA?
Oh my gosh. Well, I had some really fun memories.
Excuse me, I misspoke. From WWE. Favorite memories from WWE.
Okay, from WWE. So Wesley and I had a little rapport that we went back and forth on live television. We always had a high five where we kind of made it our thing, and on a weekly basis we were doing these high fives. And I've had so many great times with him and the Grayson Wallers of the world, and Johnny Gargano and The Way when they were doing their things, and just working under Shawn Michaels itself was just
what was
learning.
Shawn like?
It's just a learning tree, to be honest. He's a father figure, but he also is such a guider, and he wants to teach you something, and cares for the talent that are in NXT. And so I was really lucky to get to work and learn under him.
And before we go, you mentioned Grayson Waller, who I've had on the show multiple times now. Always very controversial.
I'm sorry.
What was he like?
I'm sorry. All we have to say is I'm sorry.
Yeah.
he's entertaining.
Yeah.
He's very entertaining, and the times that Grayson and I had backstage together, we really made magic on television, and that's what it's about. It's about storytelling. It's about watching the television, being able to connect to a persona and to an interviewer and whatever. And with that, I feel like we really did that. We had a good time.
And one more time, McKenzie Mitchell, where people can find you.
McKenzie and Mitchell on Instagram, on Twitter, and then you can find my YouTube show on Threads with McKenzie Mitchell on YouTube.
McKenzie Mitchell, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
So I appreciate McKenzie and Joe Hennig, Curtis Axel, joining us on the show today. So glad we could catch up with them. Both have interesting careers. Both have a lot in front of them. Curtis Axel, now a ring veteran, kind of like his dad was after all those years. He's been around a long time, doing this a long time now. And McKenzie Mitchell, just a continuing star of a broadcaster in wrestling or out of it. She's going to do wherever she goes. I was glad we were able to chat with them. And I thank you for joining us as we wrap up 2024 here. There are some big things on the horizon for Going Ringside in 2025. So glad you could join us today. We'll see you back here next time.
This has been Going Ringside with The Local Station, brought to you every Wednesday on your favorite podcast player, on News4 Jax Plus, as well as the News4 Jax YouTube channel.